I scammed a grocery store during lockdown. At the beginning of the lockdown, I lived and worked part-time in a 10-story senior housing complex. My compensation was reduced rent on a small apartment amongst other residents with an average age of about 80. Because of the lockdown, it was considered unsafe for many of my neighbors to leave their apartments. This was in the early days and months before the virus protection even became available, and the majority of people getting sick and dying in Canada were senior citizens housed in facilities with similar demographics to where I lived, albeit my neighbors lived in independent private apartments, with some supports, not a nursing home per se. I also worked the night shift from 12 to 7:30 a.m. in a neighboring town on the lockdown's front lines at a detox and addiction facility. So I'd leave for work a little after 11 p.m. and get home at about 8 o'clock each morning. I'd offer to pick up groceries for a few neighbors I knew personally, as one local grocery store restricted access, strictly enforced masking, distancing, and enforced an even lower number of customers until 9 o'clock, which was a time designated specifically for seniors and persons with a disability. On my first trip, I asked to speak to the manager and explained that although I was not a senior, I lived amongst seniors and was picking up groceries for them. He knew the complex I was talking about as he had an elderly relative living there, so he understood that I was picking up groceries for several of my neighbors whose doctors had advised them not to leave their home unless absolutely necessary. He commended me on my altruism, which was unnecessary as I felt I was benefiting from the arrangement quite well. Word spread throughout my building and I'd often leave for work only to find a dozen or more requests for a few mostly perishable items like milk, bread, eggs, a few cans of soup or toilet paper, and the money to cover the cost. Although some of the grocery stores offered delivery, it was at an additional cost and required prepayment over the internet, which many of the tenants either didn't trust, didn't have, or couldn't afford. So, I kept everything separate because for the most part, everyone overpaid and I would, despite protests, insist on providing them with change as everyone in the building was considered low income, and I knew every penny counted for most of them. For some reason, folks in my area felt a need to stockpile toilet paper during the early days of the lockdown, and there was always a shortage. Usually, those shelves where the toilet paper should be found were bare, but the manager of the grocery store knew what I was doing and would squirrel away a dozen or so small packs with each new shipment, always earmarked for my neighbors. So after doing this for a few weeks with no incidents or problems, I rounded an aisle with a cart full of the toilet paper, no longer available on their usual shelves, about a dozen loaves of bread, that many more cartons of milk, eggs and a fair amount of canned goods, when a rather well-dressed woman, definitely not a senior, saw my cart and from about 25 feet away started a very loud tirade about hoarders and selfish bastards like me ruining it for everyone. She was obviously deeply religious because she was quick to damn me and my ilk to hell. To borrow an English term, I was gobsmacked. Having come off a very difficult night shift, I just wanted to get home, deliver the groceries and go to bed, so I said nothing in my own defense, just waited for her to run out of steam. I let her rage on for what seemed like an eternity as she berated me in front of about 20 other customers and staff. I was just too tired to even react and just took it. All of the staff knew exactly who I was, as they were always great in helping me keep, bag, and pay for everything separately. They knew why I was exempt from the age restriction. The woman berating me was no older than me, so breaking the rules herself, what I was doing, and that I was doing it without any other compensation other than the appreciation and safety of my shut-in neighbors. Someone must have called the manager, who rounded the corner with a red face and rage in his eyes before launching into a tirade of his own. In the end, I had to say nothing except, "Thank you," because after he explained very loudly what I was doing and my motivation for doing it, that it was she who was obviously breaking the rules, he escorted the woman from the store with a firm and stay out. To which the customers and staff broke into applause. The manager then pulled me aside and suggested it'd be easier if I emailed him my separated list, and after that, I'd just have to pick up and pay for the separated orders. So I'd email him a list and arrive to find the orders already selected and sorted with a name and total cost stapled to the bag. I'd pay each separately with the money my neighbors provided, but I noticed it seemed cheaper than before. That's when I saw he had added a 20% discount to each total. He'd stop to say hi every day I came in, help me load the groceries into my car and tell me to have a great day, and in kind I'd thank him, and on behalf of my friends and neighbors, thank him profusely. Once the prevention shot became available, seniors were prioritized and quickly vaccinated. Then those neighbors were finally able to venture out on their own, and my help was reduced to an occasional ride to the doctor's or grocery store for those I knew personally. Most of the people I delivered groceries to never saw my face, as I'd hang the requested groceries on their door, knock loudly and shout groceries, then move on to the next door. Occasionally I'd linger and have a little visit through the closed door, but some didn't even know my name. To most I was just, "That boy on 8 at 52. I quite like that moniker." I moved from there, closer to work once virus protection became available. But every time I'm in the city, I stop in to say hi, where I'm often welcomed with, "Well, if it isn't the boy on 8.